Welcome to the Murfreesboro City Council, December 1st, 2016. This is the first council meeting that we've had in our new, our new digs that we've got. So the group has done a good job so far. I know there's still some work to go, but it's pretty cool to walk in and see that logo. So, Mr. Bill Shacklet has our prayer and our pledge.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to introduce to you Ed Grimes. Ed, if you'll step to the podium. Ed is the Executive Director of the Murfreesboro Rescue Mission, a new friend of mine that's involved in a project to address, in a growing community, there's lots of things that we focus on, but sometimes those people that are less fortunate and are in need in our community don't get the attention they need. And Ed and his group, and there's other wonderful groups in our community that are addressing this issue, but I asked Ed to come and tell us a little bit about what he's doing and then do our prayer for us. So, Ed, if you'd tell them about what you do.
Thank you so much, Bill, and City Council, Mayor, all of you who have me tonight. Let me just say this real quick. I want to thank all of you. So many of you in here I've had a chance to meet and had a chance to work with some of you. And then we got some new faces in here, but thank you so much for inviting us out tonight. Every single one of you that I've met with and talked to have been so encouraging in terms of us getting a shelter for the homeless here in our city. And, of course, it's obvious that we have a need here. There's no doubt about that. And so the goal of Murfreesboro Rescue Mission is to try to meet that need. Our number one, we do a lot of things here. One of the things that we do is we participate in coldest nights here in our city, working alongside Journey Home, First Baptist Church, St. Paul's Episcopal, all involved in helping shelter the homeless when it's 30 degrees and below. And so we're a part of that, and we're glad to be a part of that as well. But we all know that that's just a Band-Aid on the bigger issue, and that is we just need more available bed space for the homeless. And if we can get that, folks, we can start solving a lot of issues and a lot of problems. We're not the end-all, be-all, or the cure-all. Of course, my experience is 16 years of experience at Nashville Rescue Mission. That's where I come from. I'll say just real quick, I was very happy there, so I thought. But the Lord sort of just shook me up, and got my attention and directed me toward Murfreesboro, the city in which I live in. And the truth is, people would ask me about homelessness here in Murfreesboro, and I couldn't tell them very much at all about it. I know a whole lot more today, but didn't know much back then. And so I'm here with the goal of helping bring a shelter into our city. There's a lot of things going on, just real quick, in the name of homelessness here in our city, a lot of good works and ministries and organizations and so forth. And we're not the whole pie. We just want to be a piece of it. All right. And so thank you so much. Just real quick, and then we'll pray. But the goal is, hopefully, Lord willing, 2017, we hope to have funds raised and ready to purchase some property. So we're going to get to work on that right away. We've added some board members. In fact, one of our newest board members is Ann Holt. Many of you know Ann and David. They're super people. They're going to head that capital campaign up for us. So hopefully 2017, 2018 is going to be our years to get this thing done. Let's go to the Lord in prayer, shall we? Father, we thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight. And Father, thank you for our mayor, Lord. Thank you for our city council. And Father, thank you for all those who make decisions and govern in our dear city. Father, as I spoke to a man this morning, he said, we have a great city, and there's no doubt in my mind. I'm so proud to be a part of all that's going on here. Thank you for the work that you've called me to do. Father, now they'll be making some decisions here shortly, but they'll need your wisdom. They'll need strength. They'll need power. Lord, they'll need to hear from you. And Father, there'll be things that they'll come up that they just won't have the answer to, but you know. And so I pray that you'll help them with those issues. And then, Father, I pray also that you would, as we're experiencing fires over in East Tennessee, and the word has come that we've had some firemen right here from Murfreesboro go over to help with that. Father, I pray that you would just keep them safe. Bless them as they go to put out those fires, and Father, help them to help a lot of people. We have some people that lost their lives and some people that are suffering over there. They really need you over there, so we pray for them tonight especially. Bless us now, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Grimes. We've had, some weeks are better than others, and so we've had a tough week in the city. This week we lost the funeral today was for Miss Nellie Patton, who served in our transportation department for many years. She came to us from the state of Tennessee and specifically was in charge of Rover and many other different areas. So she was our assistant transportation director, so we want to keep her family and keep her children in our prayers. We are going to miss her. We also lost Mr. Randall Jordan, who for many years worked at our water and sewer department. So we want to keep his family in our prayers. And also, we all know what's happening in East Tennessee, but on a local level, I guess it was Monday night. We had several different apparatuses. I've learned that we call them a lot of equipment that left here on Monday night and went to East Tennessee. Chief Folks is heavily involved in the Tennessee Fire Chiefs Association. There's a local act where a share act where people, like when we had our Good Friday tornado and we had so many people that came to our aid, we had crews that left on Monday night, got there really, really early on Tuesday morning. Because of our NFPA, our fire trucks won't go faster than 60 miles an hour, so that makes a long trip to Gatlinburg when you can't go faster than 60. So they got there and immediately started working on Tuesday. They worked several different apartment fires, several different condominium fires, and then they worked on hot spots. A group left out yesterday morning and got there midday and replaced the group that went up before that group got back last night. And our other group has been working nonstop. They now are helping staff Gatlinburg's fire department to handle their calls while Gatlinburg is working through. I think the number is over 50% of the city, a 10 square mile city, has been affected one way or another. And then to tell you what type of residents we have, he would not appreciate me saying this, but I feel like we need to. George Huddleston stepped up today and just out of the blue called and said, I will fly anyone or any supplies that need to be flown to East Tennessee. So he flew up Chief Folks and Chaplain Lee Douglas today, and Lee texted him earlier. Lee's up there now working. Chief Folks is back home, but George Huddleston just selflessly did that. So, that's part of being a Tennessee volunteer, even going all the way back to the Alamo. That's part of what we do. And someone had said that they were surprised on the interstate that they had taken a picture and saw Murfreesboro fire trucks in East Tennessee. And I think we all know from what we experienced not too many years ago that if the same thing happened here, there would be people from West Tennessee, East Tennessee, who'd be here helping us. So I see Mr. Sachs out in the audience, and I know when we had the same thing happen, we had electric companies from many different jurisdictions who came in and helped. And I think you guys had power on in less than 2 days. So it's something we're proud of, and the people in East Tennessee will be in our prayers. And what we're hearing, Mr. Lyons, that we feel like that there's a week or so more that they'll be working.
Yeah, we've got, right now we are serving as the Gatlinburg Fire and Rescue Department. We've got our personnel and equipment in their fire stations, so if 911's called in Gatlinburg, Murfreesboro Fire and Rescue employee is going to respond. So we are proud to help out Gatlinburg. Certainly been a major incident, and we want to do everything we can to help them.
So the city manager in Gatlinburg, her home was burned down. The mayor's home and businesses were burned down. In a small world, my college buddy is the mayor of Pigeon Forge, and so he contacted me saying thank you for Murfreesboro. So we appreciate our men and women of our Murfreesboro Fire and Rescue Department and appreciate what they've done. There are many who went up there that immediately on Monday night came off shift and went up there. So they worked for nonstop for almost 2 days without sleep. So if you see a firefighter, give them a hug. All right, you have the consent agenda in front of you. You have 4 different items on the consent agenda.
I move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman. I'm sorry. Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Mr. Smotherman he texted me he had a dental procedure, so I think he had 2 root canals. So I don't think he would have been very good here tonight. We probably wouldn't have been able to understand him very well. All right, we'll move into second readings and consider for passage on second and final reading ordinance 16048 to amend chapter 2525 signs, section 2525-2, 2525-24, 25.25-26, dealing with certain definitions, prohibited signs, signs placed in easements, height of attached signs in the Central Business District, CBD, and interstate on-site signs, 2016-803.
Move for approval. Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Consider for passage on second and final reading ordinance 16OZ49 to zone an area along South Rutherford Boulevard as Highway Commercial CH District simultaneous with annexation 2016-446.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
No.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Consider for passage on second and final reading ordinance 16OZ-50 to rezone an area located along Salem Drive to planned residential PRD district, Ashton at Salem Creek, 2016-452.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Consider for passage on second and final reading ordinance 16OZ-52 to rezone an area at 720 Old Salem Road to Highway Commercial CH District, 2016-443.
Move for approval. Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Consider for passage on second and final reading ordinance 16OZ-54 to rezone an area located along South Rutherford Boulevard to residential 0 lot line RZ District, 2016-451.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll move into new business. Pursuant to Resolution 16-RPH-55 adopted by the City Council on October 13th-2016, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider rezoning approximately 5.7 acres along Osborne Lane from a single-family residential RS-15 district to commercial fringe district and to rezone approximately 0.6 acres from general office OG district to commercial fringe CF district. Chuck Barnes is the applicant, 2016-431. Notice of said public hearing was published in November 2016 issue of a local newspaper. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. Happy to report that I can talk tonight.
Yeah, your voice is much better than it was the other night.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I think the cough drop helped out tremendously.
No problem.
Our first public hearing tonight is for property located along the south side of Osborne Lane. You can see it's on the map in front of you. It's the area colored in blue and purple, which is presently zoned RS-15 and OG. It's undeveloped property owned by Mr. Prentice Alsop. His son-in-law, Mr. Chuck Barnes, has power of attorney for the property and wishes to develop a self-storage facility on the property. And he's made a zoning request for the property, which total of 6.3 acres, including the 5.7 that's RS-15 and 0.6 that's OG, to be rezoned to CF. The CF zone does permit self-storage uses by special use permit. So even if the zoning is approved, his intended use is we'll still have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for another public hearing, and we'll have to demonstrate that it's compliant with the criteria in the zoning ordinance for a self-service storage facility. The Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this matter on September the 7th. There was a good deal of public input. It was a very productive public hearing. And at that time, the Planning Commission deferred action on the matter. After the Planning Commission deferred action on the matter, the representative of the neighbor met with Mr. Bill Huddleston and Mr. Clyde Roundtree, who were representing Mr. Barnes, the applicant. They sat down and they discussed how his project could be developed in a way that would be sensitive to the surrounding neighborhood. And after that time, Mr. Richard Martin, the representative of the neighbors, contacted me and told me that on behalf of the neighbors, that they were generally satisfied with what Mr. Barnes and Mr. Roundtree and Mr. Huddleston were offering them. So staff brought the matter back to the Planning Commission under old business on September 21st, and the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the zoning request. And so we have it for you here tonight to rezone this property to CF. One thing that I will mention that I wanted to make clear to the Planning Commission, and I'll make clear to you, what the applicant has represented to the neighbors in his good faith effort to tell them how he plans to develop the property and the particular use that he plans to develop the property with. That's not binding. He's requesting commercial fringe zoning. So any use that is permitted in that zone that meets the minimum standards could be developed in that zone. One thing that I will say, as you can see on the map in front of you, it is an oddly positioned piece of property with very minimal road frontage on Osborne Lane, and it sits a good ways off of Osborne Lane. So so it would really have very limited utility. A number of commercial uses that would require visibility. This would likely not be a very well-positioned property for those types of uses. But with that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions either before or after the public hearing. Mr. Clyde Roundtree, representing Mr. Barnes, is here, as is Mr. Barnes, who is the proposed developer of the property.
Any questions for Mr. Blumley?
Does the sketch that's included in that, does that go along with the document, or what is?
That is what Bill Huddleston and Clyde Roundtree drew up for their meeting with Mr. Martin, who was representing the neighbors, and that's been included. As I mentioned, it's nothing that they can be held to by the city, but it's what they presented to the neighbors as a good faith effort to show them how they intended to develop the property. So that's more provided in your packets for informational purposes.
I got a quick question. I don't want to start the discussion before we have the public hearing, but would this be a candidate for a planned commercial development, since it gives more of you're basically plopping it right in the middle of existing homes? Did staff talk to the applicants about that?
I mean, we talked to the applicants. I don't know that we ever seriously discussed a planned development. It does border commercial on its. I wouldn't say per se it's in the middle of residential. It borders commercial on its
Right.
on its west side, and there are large estate lots zoned RS15 to the north and to the east. So it's bordered directly by 4 single-family residential lots.
I got you.
Yep.
All right. Does the applicant want to?
I believe Mr. Roundtree is here and Mr. Barnes. I don't know that they have a formal presentation, but they're here to answer questions.
Okay. We will then open the public, or we'll have a public hearing. So we've got several public hearings tonight. Our guidelines that we like to go by: if you're representing a group, you'll have 5 minutes. If you're representing an individual, 3 minutes. If you have any questions, if you'll direct those to the city council, we can't answer those during the public hearing, but we will get those answered after the public hearing. So if you want to speak, we'll ask you to come to the podium, state your name and address, and anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium. We'll open the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council. My name is Richard Martin. I live at 292 Osborne Lane, immediately adjacent to the proposed development. First of all, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to Mr. Blomley with the absolutely outstanding assistance he gave me in weaving through this pattern, and also to Clyde Roundtree and Bill Huddleston and Chuck Barnes and his wife in answering and addressing all the concerns we had. It's as I've told Chuck, considering the way they have designed at least the preliminary design for the storage buildings, it would probably be less impact upon the surrounding property than if a subdivision or zero lot line went in there. And it certainly concerns us, and I have several neighbors here with us. We are very actively involved in what we term the country of Osbornia out there on Osborne Lane. And so we could keep a close watch on this, certainly. But again, and looking through the information that I downloaded today from the internet regarding the summary of memos and minutes of the meeting, it appears to be totally and completely accurate and in full agreement with the requests that we made. Any of you have anything else to say? Any questions from anyone?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against?
Mayor, council members, my name is Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel Engineering. I would just like to as well appreciate and thank Mr. Martin and his neighbors as far as their participation. They brought to our attention some of the sensitivities on the property, and that conceptual site plan is really to honor Mr. Martin's effort to understand geology and water, and there's some drainage concerns that are on this site, and that's why all the units as they're proposed on the concept are justified towards the western side of the property. We also, to really try to appease the neighbors' concerns, Mr. Barnes is committed to the actual structure color. You know, there'd be something more of a neutral color, darker earth tone kind of color to make it blend in with the natural surroundings, as well as try to create some kind of a perimeter of preserved landscape, natural landscape around the facility as well. So it was a real good cooperation trying to work through the process together. And I think the neighbors brought to our attention some of the concerns that were based on the history of them living next to that property. So I just want to personally thank them for helping us get clarification on that, and for Mr. Barnes to be flexible and working through the process with them and trying to make sure the master plan as it stands right now, even though conceptual, respects their concerns as well as allows it to be developed towards Mr. Barnes' desire. So thank you. And I'm available for any questions if you have any.
Mr. Roundtree, what's your level of certainty that this will be able to be built like this, given the constraints on the property?
Very confident as far as the actual location of the units and basically probably the quantity of the units. That was not real arbitrary. Bill Huddleston did some research on the actual grading and how the drainage would work. So, Rick, I think there's probably a pretty good accuracy that will be done in real world.
You know, our worry would be that we change it to a bulk zoning, and then you get in there and find out you can't do it, and then all of a sudden we've changed the bulk zoning, and that list of questions that we've answered and that y'all have been so great about just really is meaningless. So,
right. I think Mr. Barnes can speak towards that if he'd like to, but I know that the self-storage has really been a part of his vision for the property. I don't think there's been any intention to shift from that direction. Is that correct? And so, and they're more than willing to deal with, because it was really an undeveloped area where the sinkhole is, so they feel like they got the yield they're looking for as far as units are concerned. So I feel like we got a pretty tight concept there.
I read in the Planning Commission minutes that there was discussion about deed restrictions on the property. Is that something that the applicant had talked about to ensure to the residents that it would be a self-storage and that it wouldn't, so...
I'm not sure exactly. I mean, I think there was some verbal commitments made towards the color of the structures being earth tone, trying to preserve the natural buffer, justifying the property, respect the sinkhole. Whether those are in the form of a restricted covenant, I'm not sure if we've gotten to that. I mean, I think, are we willing to do that, Chuck, if we need to do that?
Council. Chuck Barnes, the applicant. Our full intentions, and as we discussed in our plans from the get-go, was to develop this as self-storage, to bring, obviously, less impactful business to the neighborhood because we knew that we're single-family homes. We have commercial to both sides of us other than the single-family homes, but the property itself lends it to self-storage versus any other kind of business. The proximity to the road, the access, visibility, and like I said, our full commitment right now is if we do get approval is to go forward with this project. And that's what I'm saying to them. And if something happens that it can't be developed as self-storage, then we'll go through the whole process again if there's anything else that we can do with it. But like I said, today and this whole time, our commitment is for the self-storage.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you. All right, anyone else wishing to speak for or against? All right, we'll close the public hearing. Have any questions for Mr. Blomley? Mr. Blomley, I have one question. Can you just give us some quick uses that are permitted on commercial fringe?
Sure.
Let me dovetail on that just while you're talking about that exact thing, is there any other zoning that would allow the self-storage that's a lesser impact zoning? So same type of question, but
I think it's the only other comparable zone that would allow self-storage is commercial local, and commercial local is generally, and that's by special use permit also. Commercial local is generally something that we try to get away from. It's kind of a remnant zone of a time past. It allows multifamily uses like triplexes and quadruplexes, and so it really kind of opens the door to other uses that commercial fringe doesn't allow. Commercial fringe was adopted in the late 90s as a transitional zone to be more sensitive to adjacent residential areas. It allows much of the retail, restaurant, office type uses that you would see in a standard commercial zoning district, but it takes away a lot of the more intense, what some might consider obnoxious commercial uses, that is adjacent to residential areas, such as auto sales, auto repair, contractors, storage, warehousing, of course, other than self-storage warehouses. It would not allow things like greenhouses and nurseries. So a lot of those uses that have kind of an outdoor component or that might be more intense, but it does allow a lot of the uses that might serve the surrounding neighborhood and that might be seen as being more compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. And it does have requirements in it for so that gas pumps, so that menu boards for fast food restaurants are located a minimum distance away from residential zoning in order to be more sensitive. And that's some extra standards that are placed on the CF zone that aren't on other commercial zoning districts.
Okay.
In the sketch, and just a question, is that when we've got that little purple nub of OG that's being rezoned, but in the sketch, it doesn't look like it is considered. Is that?
That is actually property that was that was a relative of Mr. Alsop's. Mr. Barnes, during the process, after he originally made application, acquired power of attorney for that property as well, and he's looking to include that into his development. And let me get there we go. So the blue area and the purple area is all in the Alsop family. And Mr. Barnes, if the rezoning is successful, I believe would actually acquire both. He says he's already acquired both areas, so he has closed on those properties, and so both purple area and the blue area would be a part of the self-storage.
So the sketch really is not exactly what you're thinking, Chuck. You're going.
It's not, no, sir, that was not included on the sketch.
Right. Okay. That little nub is. And I'm assuming, are you planning on putting buildings in that nub? Is that
That's approximately a half
Would-
an acre.
okay?
We would probably do
Something in that office. Yeah.
Mr. Bowling, my only concern, and it sounds like the applicant is worked out with the neighbors, but where the new speedway has been built on the corner, there's an adjacent piece of property that I think is, I don't know what the zoning is on that. Is it?
Commercial local.
So my only concern would be that, if for some reason we have to, this is nothing against the applicant, but we have to think in worst case scenarios. And if the project didn't get developed and someone wanted to piece together larger parcels there, you've got the opportunity that you could almost do some larger development there. So it sounds like the neighbors are okay, but that is just a concern of not, if the development didn't happen, there's a piece of commercial local that the neighbors would have the anticipation that it was going to be a self-storage and it not turn out to be that. So
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, I've tried to be very upfront during this process that both to the Planning Commission and tonight that what he is showing is purely a good faith effort, and it's by no means anything that we can hold him to. And I think that the neighbors are aware that that's the case. I've tried to make as I've talked to Mr. Martin representing the neighbors, I've tried to consistently make him aware of that as well.
Okay. All right, we now need to consider for passage on first reading ordinance 16OZ55 to rezone an area located along Osborne Lane to commercial fringe CF District 2016-431.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Kels Harris. Aye. Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll now move to item 8, pursuant to Resolution 16R-PH51, adopted by the City Council on October 31st, 2016. We'll conduct a public hearing to consider 1, adoption of a plan of services for an annexation of 21.5 acres, and 2, zoning of approximately 21.5 acres along West Thompson Lane, which have been proposed to be annexed to the City of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, to plan residential development PRD district and rezone approximately 1.5 acres from single family residential RS15 district to planned residential development PRD district and rezone approximately 1.1 acres from college and university CU district to planned residential development PRD district. Caroline Farms, 2016-516, 2016-445. Notice of said public hearing was published in the November 14th, 2016 issue of a local newspaper. I want to go ahead and let the council members know Mr. Dotson and I have past relationship in dealings, and out of an abundance of caution, I'm going to abstain from any discussion in this. Ms. Green.
Thank you. This first public hearing that I'm going to explain is for you to consider the annexation and also to consider the plan of services for this property, which is a component of the annexation. We'll conduct this public hearing, and then after which I'll come back up and we'll open the public hearing for the zoning change request. But specifically speaking on the annexation of the property, this is for a petition which we received from the property owners for the property shaded in blue on the map before you. The large area that's shaded yellow with the green border is current city limits. What's white is in the unincorporated area of Rutherford County, and the blue area is the 21.5 acre portion of property for which annexation is being requested. There is a smaller 1.5 or acre and a half portion of this property that's already in the city limits. It's the yellow area that's closest to West Thompson Lane. That was annexed back in the 80s and zoned RS15 when it was annexed. The remainder of the property was left out. This petition is for you to consider the remainder of the property to be annexed. As I mentioned, the owners have submitted a petition to you requesting annexation of their property. Mr. Stephen Dotson is not the applicant on the annexation because he does not own the property. The Kellys are. But he does have a contract to purchase the property and will be the applicant on the zoning change request, which is the next item that I alluded to earlier. As I mentioned, this is 21.5 acres, and we received a petition. You can see from the map that the property is contiguous with current city limits on its eastern, southern, and western property lines. We've provided you a plan of services that outlines the services that can be provided to this property and a reasonable time for them to be provided. And we have identified that that is an area that can be annexed effectively, easily. The right-of-way of West Thompson Lane, of course, is already located within city limits. The Planning Commission did conduct a public hearing on the matter of the annexation and the matter of the plan of services, after which their vote was unanimously to approve the annexation and the plan of services. Mr. Rob Mulchin is representing the applicant. He'll have a presentation for the zoning change request, but if you have questions regarding the annexation, he's available to answer them. Mr. Dotson is here regarding the annexation, and I don't believe the Kellys are here, or regarding the zoning. The Kellys aren't here for the annexation. If you have questions, I'll be glad to answer them either before or after the public hearing. But you should conduct the public hearing and consider both the matters of the plan of service and the petitions as separate motions.
Any questions for Ms. Green? Okay, we'll need to conduct a public hearing on a plan of services for an annexation of approximately 21.5 acres located along West Thompson Lane. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing.
Move for passage.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland. And this is on the plan of services.
Abstain. We'll now consider for adoption Resolution 16R, or excuse me, we just did the plan of services. Okay, we'll consider for adoption Resolution 16R, A51, to annex approximately 21.5 acres along West Thompson Lane and to incorporate the same within the corporate boundaries of the city of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Diane and Grant Kelly applicants. And our public hearing was for the plan of services and the annexation.
Correct.
Move for passage.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Pass. Ms. Green.
Thank you. I'm back up to talk about the zoning request, which I mentioned previously. The property which you just considered for annexation, that property is a portion of this request. The zoning request is actually separated into three parts. The 21.5 acres, which you just recommended approval and adoption of the plan of services and annexation, is shaded blue on the map, and that's 21.5 acres. The request is to zone that PRD, planned residential district, simultaneous with the annexation. The second part of this request is to rezone the portion of property that's currently located within city limits in zoned RS15, the area shaded purple along West Thompson Lane, from the RS15 or single family residential district to PRD, planned residential district. And the third part of this request may strain your eyes a bit to see, but there's a linear orange area running along the blue of the property, and this property is zoned CU, College University. It's part of the Miller Coliseum property, and the request is to change the zoning from CU to PRD, planned residential district. So if approved, this request, which can be divided into three parts, will be for all the property to be zoned PRD. And there's a program book called Caroline Farms, which has been couriered to you and included in your agenda materials that shows the PRD zoning plan. The property is adjacent to the Miller Coliseum, which is zoned CU, College University. Along the south side are the Siegel School complexes. The property located to the west is zoned PRD, planned residential district, and was zoned PRD just this year, and it's for a development which has 130 single multifamily townhome style units and 31 single family units, and it's called General's Landing. The applicant have requested that this property, which totals 24.1 acres, be zoned PRD to allow the development of a maximum of 112 single-family detached lots on the property. The density is about 4.6 dwelling units per acre. The details for the lots are included in your material sheet of the agenda book, and they are as follows. The minimum lot size is to be just over 5,000 square feet. The minimum home size is 1,800 square feet with a 2-car front entry garage and decorative doors. The homes are to have masonry exteriors with vinyl allowed only in the decorative trim. The homes will have foundation landscaping, sodded front yards. The streets will have decorative mailboxes and streetlights, and the 4-rail fencing that is along West Thompson Lane will continue along West Thompson Lane. When we reviewed this plan, it was very important to staff to make sure that the component of the major thoroughfare plan shown on the screen before you now is maintained. You can see that the major thoroughfare plan calls for West Thompson Lane to be improved to 5-lane streets. Currently it's 2-lane, 3 lanes in some sections. And that is a TDOT project, which I don't have a firm date for you that it's going to happen, but the plans, we've asked the design team to make sure that any necessary right-of-way is available and will be dedicated so that when those improvements happen, there'll be the appropriate right-of-way there. You can also see that I've drawn a bubble around a north-south connector that says 3. So there's a proposed connector street to go from West Thompson Lane to Cherry Lane, and it's proposed to be a 3-lane street. And when we met with Mr. Dotson with this application, we pointed out to him how important that was to us and that this is really the only opportunity or last opportunity we have to make sure that happens. So the plan has incorporated that north-south connector shown on the major thoroughfare plan. That was important to point out to both you and the Planning Commission. I'm going to invite Mr. Rob Mulchin to the lectern at this moment to go through the specifics of the plan. If you have questions, of course, I'll be glad to answer them either before or after the public hearing. The PC did consider this item and are recommending to you, the Planning Commission, I'm sorry. Planning Commission is recommending unanimously that you do approve the zoning change request. And I'll go ahead and invite Mr. Mulchin, there he is, to the lectern.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I'm Rob Mulchin with SEC, here tonight on behalf of Mr. Stephen Dotson, who is in attendance with us tonight, to give you a little brief overview about Caroline Farms, the request for rezoning. Just a little background on the property itself. As Margaret Ann talked about, we are just located just north of West Thompson Lane, bordered by Miller Coliseum on the east and the General's Landing on the west side, and then, of course, some agricultural properties around the northern portion of the property itself. To the east, the Miller Coliseum is classified as a college university type zoning, and the PRD next door for General's Landing. And then there's the first agricultural farm off to the side of the zone as a residential component at this point. Little background on the history of this property in regards to the topography. The property is pretty much kind of very shallow and grade changes. The property does move from the middle portion of the property moves towards the south and west towards West Thompson Lane and eventually Hooper's Bottom. The portion to the north kind of moves slowly towards the northeast and off the property itself. We do have, with the property itself, there is the city does have most of the utilities in place at this point in time. West Thompson Lane, we do have water and sewer. There's also along the eastern boundary along Miller Coliseum, there's an affluent line that runs along there. The city actually has a 60-foot easement along that portion of the property that was originally intended to be part of this major thoroughfare connection that Margaret Ann talked about in regards to the thoroughfare plan, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a little bit. Just a couple of quick shots of the existing conditions. This is a view from where the entrance would be on West Thompson Lane. This is looking towards the west. As you can see here, this is a 3-lane cross section with bike lanes on both sides. Just down the road from here, the cross section does taper back down to a 2-lane cross section for traffic on that side. This is a view back towards the east from the entrance itself. You can see the dedicated left-hand turn lane in the center there that turns into the Siegel High School entrance, which our main roadway will be aligning with as you come into the community. And these are just some of the pictures of the existing conditions on the site, showing pretty much open farmlands with some pockets of trees. This is the view of the equestrian fields next door at Miller Coliseum. That'll be back there. It'll be along the eastern side of the development. And again, here's a picture of the entrance to Siegel High School. Like I said, the roadway itself will line up and will make that a more or less a four-way intersection as the project develops out. The plan itself, 112 lots on 24 acres. You're looking at roughly a density of 4.6 units to the acre. Minimum lot sizes are about 5,200 square feet. Those are just for a few of the lots there at the beginning of the development as you come in off of West Thompson Lane, just because the property pinches down, so the lots are a little bit smaller. But our typical lot size is roughly 6,000 square feet. That's typically about a 55 by 120 foot sized lot. The home sizes will average more or less in the mid-twos, but the smallest minimum square footage would be 1,800 square feet to roughly 3,000 square feet or above on home sizes. This plan, more or less, has been a joint effort between my client, the city, and MTSU. Relationship to what I was talking about before is the 60-foot easement and the drainage area. If you can see, as I'm pointing out over here, along the edge, as Margaret Ann talked about, there is a 60-foot easement the city has currently that has effluent or reuse water lines running through it. That was intended to be for the extension or the connector road running between West Thompson Lane and Cherry Lane in the future as part of the major thoroughfare plan. We'll be utilizing a small portion of this easement and area as part of this project to allow for the lots to work between the two property lines and then get the collector road in between on the property itself to manifest the roadway connections. Again, the property, all these streets in the development will be public streets. This is a very walkable community. There will be sidewalks on both sides of the streets themselves. We've got roughly a little more than 2 acres of open space. All utilities will be underground, and we'll be utilizing decorative street lights and mailboxes along the properties. The actual residential yards will be, the front yards will be sodded. There'll be foundation landscapings around the buildings themselves on the front side. And we'll also be looking at utilizing a tree on each lot to kind of add a little extra character to the neighborhood. Major thoroughfare plan we talked about. There's the main connection between West Thompson Lane and Cherry Lane. It's supposed to be a 3-lane connector road between the two major thoroughfares to kind of help ease some of the traffic burden as the city develops over time. This is the last piece of property that will allow for this major connection to happen between Cherry Lane and West Thompson Lane. This will also benefit in the future also as the road extends all the way through past our project to Cherry Lane as an extra connection into the Siegel Soccer Complex at some point in time as the city develops out the northern portion. This is about a little over a 5,500 linear foot section of roadway between these two, between West Thompson Lane and Cherry Lane. A little bit more than half of that will be on this project's development side. The other remaining portion will be on the city side as it connects up to Cherry Lane.
Can I ask a question as it relates to the slide before this one and this particular slide? Can you back up a slide?
Mm-hmm. Have that back, guys. Yes.
So it looks to me like, is there going to be a 290-degree turns on that connector?
Correct. That was part of what working with the city staff. That was one of the plans to help minimize the amount of really heavy movement of traffic at high speeds. There's kind of a traffic calming device is what we were looking at in that regards. Plus, that helps it line up with the existing property the city already owns at the end of that connection through there. Like I said, this is going to be roughly a 3-lane cross section with sidewalks on either side. Also looking at as part of the overall plan with this is that as part of the overall connection with the connector leading north of our property towards Siegel Park is the potential for the multi-use path as a connection. We talked a little bit about this during the Planning Commission. This will help add another segment to an overall greenway pathway that will allow for the pathway to go all the way from the northern part of the city all the way back to Barfield Crescent at some point in time. Access, we're looking at 3 access points. The main access point will be off West Thompson Lane. That'll be aligned with the entrance to Siegel High School. As you can see, we're looking at making this a 4-lane cross section. You have 1 lane coming into the development and heading north. You'll have a dedicated left-hand turn lane onto West Thompson Lane. a through lane back into the high school entrance itself, and then also a dedicated right-hand lane to head westward on West Thompson. The second entrance location will be on the future connection point with the extension of this connector road to the north. This is where you were just asking Mr. Lance about the jog and the property. Currently, right now, the city owns this piece of property here, which leads up to the Siegel Soccer Complex. This is where the alignment will come through in regards to working with MTSU and their willingness to help us out on the connectivity side of things, working on access points and easements and stuff to get this roadway to go through on that segment through there. And our third connection will be over to General's Landing. So we'll get this set as we develop, move forward in construction document phase. We'll work with the existing neighborhood next door as that develops out to align both of these roadways for our third access point. The homes themselves, 1 to 2 story homes, roughly looking at 1,800 square feet minimums up to a little over 3,000. 2-car garage. These will all be front-loaded elevations. They'll have decorative garage doors. We'll be using high-quality materials, brick, stone, hardy board, vinyl will only be used in the trim areas. Here's a few of the conceptual renderings of the home types that will be going in development. And then on the amenities side, we're looking at 2 open space areas, really the front entrance itself, and then there's one in the back that will be handling the stormwater detention. The main entrance focus up here in the entrance is going to be putting in a split rail fence with some stone piers and columns and such, along with our entrance monument to more or less frame the entranceway. It'll be run all the way along our frontage along West Thompson Lane and then turn back down the open space towards the residential lots in the community itself. With that, I'm open for any questions, whether it's now or during the after the public hearing. So, thank you.
Is it 2 lanes or 3 lanes all the way to the north?
3 lanes all the way through. So, it's, as part of the major thoroughfare plan, going through our development, it'll be a 3-lane cross section. Then, once it gets developed past our property, it's still going to be 3 lanes all the way between the 2 roadways.
What is the time frame of the 3 phases? How build out? What do you anticipate? Do you have any?
Well, the initial phase will come out probably in the next 150 days or so after we get through the rezoning process, get in the construction documents, get that going. So once we get those plans into the city on the go through planning commission, so you're looking at probably a construction time frame, probably about a good 6 months or so out to get the the first phase coming off of West Thompson Lane started and initiated to move forward on that side. And then looking at, subsequently as development goes, get to that 80% level more or less on sales with that first phase, then they'll start initiating moving forward with that. So it's really based on marketplace right. And how much they go through on that side.
But final phase, how many are we years?
Yeah, you're talking a few years down the road because you're talking about 112 lots altogether. So if you figure you break that out into about roughly about 40 units per phase more or less on that side. Sell through those, you're talking a couple of years down the road to get to that final connectivity point down the side.
The obvious question, that road access, when is that coming in? When are we going to have that back access road built back to Cherry Lane?
Mr. Shacklet, Mayor and members of the council, Sam Huddleston, City Engineering Department. If I could just back up, Mr. Molchan may not have been aware of a recent change we had made with the developer and the design team, but we did reduce the width of that connection through the neighborhood to a 2-lane section, hoping to provide some traffic calming there with a little bit narrow street section. And there are very few left turn needs through there that would constitute a 3-lane section. Really, Mr. Shacklet, regarding the extension of the balance of that roadway over to Cherry Lane, it would really be a project that planning, engineering, transportation staff would work with administration to get that on our radar screen. As we're reviewing the capital improvements plan, starting in the next few days, we'll review that connection and then talk about sources of funding and timing on that. Cherry Lane is projected to be under construction in about 3 years. So it would be nice if we could marry the timing of the subdivision development and connection of that roadway and connection to Cherry Lane so that they're all available in about the 3 to 4 to 5 year time frame.
Mr. Huddleston, just as I'm looking at this, this really has less, well, it has to do with this property, but really I figure it might impact it positively, if anything. But I think we've already dealt with the PRD directly to the west, where we've already that's gone through the process, the General's Retreat.
Correct. And they have submitted plans for our approval for the start of construction of the first phases on that project.
I guess to get to the end of my question, the question would be, we know what each of these owners wants to do. Why would we not be running Siegel Road straight across Thompson Lane to the north instead of having to make all of that traffic get out onto Thompson Lane and go a quarter mile or whatever it is and then turn left back onto the north? I mean, look, because here's this is sort of a little bit of a quandary. We need the connector to get to Cherry Lane, but we don't necessarily want to run it right through the middle of a neighborhood without putting some little zigs and zags in it. I mean, that's the quandary we always run into. So is there a way we can go back and say, hey, look, let's run this thing straight north where we've got a real connector, still giving them the density they want, give them the density they want. They don't have to run the road over there, but somehow they might have to give up something to the General's Retreat folks.
I think, Mr. LaLance, we would go back and review the process of the Major Thoroughfare Plan. The Major Thoroughfare Plan document identified the need and the approximate location of that proposed connection. And at the time they would have considered, in that planning process, they would have considered possible alternatives. What I will say is immediately north of the General's Retreat property is the spray irrigation farm, Jordan Farm, and we use a good bit of that Jordan Farm immediately north for spray irrigation. The property further east on the Jordan Farm has less utility for spray irrigation and perhaps more utility for roadway connections. Second thing I'll mention to you is that as we planned Siegel Soccer Park, we identified a 60-foot corridor and set that aside for this connection. So we already have property purchased and the corridor established on the west side of Siegel Soccer Park on that property for this roadway.
You see what I'm saying, though, as far as when I come up Siegel Road to the north, all of the traffic that's coming from Battleground, Siegel Road, instead of being able to go straight on to Cherry Lane, they're going to have to get out onto Thompson Lane and create more traffic there, go down, and then get into a turn lane to get back into this, go straight through a dense neighborhood to be able to get to Cherry Lane.
There's certainly some merit to traffic on Siegel Road being able to continue directly north on that route, but traffic from other parts of Thompson Lane and other neighborhoods there still have to traverse Thompson Lane and making a turn at some point and going through an intersection at some point. So you're trading perhaps traffic that might go direct from Siegel Road for traffic that still has to turn at some point in there. And then the second thing I would say about that is that the connection there was seen more so as a connection to make the link and not necessarily as a high-volume, high-traffic thoroughfare. And that's...
I guess here's what I would ask in this way. Since we know what each developer wants out of their property, we know because we've got their plans. Well, let's just say they each want 100 lots, just to make our math easy. If we went back to them and said, hey, look, here's the density you can get, but why don't you leave us 80 feet over here? You might have to scoot over a little bit. Is that even possible to try to think that way where we could just run it straight up and not run it through the middle of a bunch of houses so we don't have to worry about traffic calming?
I think it sends us back to the drawing board on a lot of planning documents and property acquisition and plans. We've already progressed to this point, but certainly it is possible. What I would say is that one of the benefits we saw in working with this development is the opportunity for the developer to construct a road that the city was going to be obligated to construct to begin with.
I don't have a problem. Look, I see the merit in this project looking at it individually. All I'm kind of saying is when I'm looking at the bigger picture, it just seems like we'd rather go straight on through and jump right across the road and head straight on up to Cherry Lane. And if we could do that without having to go through houses and the developers all still get what they want, seems like that'd be pretty awesome.
And I guess perhaps in your view on that, the roadway connecting Thompson Lane to Cherry Lane would have no direct access frontage, no lots fronting on it.
Well, I don't know that specifically, but for some of it wouldn't, because you'd be on Murfreesboro, you'd be on our property for a good bit of it. But if we moved them over, then yeah, maybe so.
Yeah, that certainly has some merit and some consideration.
It'd take a lot of work. I understand that. I guess I'm just trying to.
It would
it's
take
all happened
work
here
and
in a
time.
relatively close period of time. The general's retreat just came up a few weeks ago, so I don't know. I'm just kind of looking at it and thinking,
yes,
if I was trying to get from my house to Siegel Soccer Park, I'd definitely rather just take a left and hit the parking lot rather than take a left, then take a right, then take a left through a neighborhood, take another right, and then take a left again to get there. I don't know, and that's why I asked. I just wonder how much, if it's even possible to even start thinking that way.
Yeah, I think our biggest current obstacle would be that the developer of General's Retreat has already applied for permits, and they've moved forward with construction plans, construction lending, and those sorts of things, and so
all right, man.
It would cause a hardship and delay on their part.
Okie doke.
Okay, we'll need to conduct a public hearing to consider zoning approximately 21.5 acres along West Thompson Lane as planned residential development PRD district simultaneous with annexation. Rezone approximately 1.5 acres from single-family residential 15 RS15 district to planned residential development PRD district, and to rezone approximately 1.1 acres from College and University CU district to planned residential development PRD district, Caroline Farms. Stephen Dotson, applicant, 2016-445. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium. Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll consider for passage on first reading ordinance 16OZ51 to zone 21.5 acres along West Thompson Lane as planned residential development PRD district simultaneous with annexation. Rezone approximately 1.5 acres from single-family residential 15 RS15 district to planned residential development PRD district, and to rezone approximately 1.1 acres from College and University CU district to planned residential development PRD district, Caroline Farms. Stephen Dotson, applicant, 2016-445.
I know that you're going to need to make some discussion, but if your decision is to approve this PRD, I would request that you approve it with the amendment that the program book that shows a 3-lane going all the way through be reduced to a 2-lane. That it was news to me, and the program book specifically calls for a 3-lane. We can change that, no problem, but your motion would need to be specifically to change that from the 3-lane to the 2-lane. And that would, of course, be maintaining the 4-lane intersection at Thompson Lane. That wouldn't change, but running through the development. And I'll have Mr. Taylor revise the program book before second reading to make sure that that's incorporated in there. Page 19 shows the details for you. I just wanted to ask you to do that if your decision was to approve it.
Has there been some, I wonder when the discussion was made with the developer about going from 3 to 2, how does that impact the traffic? The thing that I'm concerned about the traffic on a road that's already loaded, and yet you go from trying to get out of this development before we have access at another point is going to be a nightmare for these residents in this subdivision. It would be bad as it is right now, but you add this number of homes in a 2 or 3 year period, it's going to be a nightmare. And I wonder, now we've made the road 2 lanes, does it make it more difficult? Because you don't have that lane going straight across to Siegel. They're going to have to hold up.
And the difference in the right-of-way width is from 55 feet to 40 feet. 3-lane cross-section doesn't allow parking on the street. A 2-lane possibly does, depending on the design. But Mr. Whitaker was involved in those discussions, so I'd like to ask him to answer your question, if that's okay.
Okay.
Mr. Shack, when we were looking at this connector, I'd like to actually try to answer a couple of questions. We've been working on this project for some time. When we were designing this, we originally thought 3-lane road section for this connector. After speaking with our traffic director, looking at it, thinking about it, what we didn't want it to turn into, it's actually a connector. It is not a major thoroughfare. So the 3-lane cross section lends itself to faster speeds, street parking. So by reducing that, we hope to slow down the speeds, putting some turns, because it's only a connector. It's not made to be a major thoroughfare through the 2 points. And it's also to give the subdivision a way to get to the park, and also by connecting the subdivision that you had previously approved to the west, I believe, there's a light at that proposed at that intersection. It will also give this subdivision access to a light to come back out on Thompson Lane. And we didn't feel that we actually felt that the 3-lane cross section would be not beneficial to the people living in the subdivision. So actually they've got two, as illustrated earlier, 2 points out on Thompson Lane. Eventually they'll have one back out to Cherry Lane. And with the way they're going to stage this in and build out, and also we hope sometime in the future the state will be 4-laning Thompson Lane as well. So we're looking at, I think, a 3-year build out. The first section, how many lots? 30, 40 lots in this first section of the build out. And I believe that takes us to the connector with the subdivision. Yes, to the general landing connector as well. So, but we didn't want this to turn into some type of major thoroughfare, and that's why. And Mr. Lance, you'd asked earlier, why we didn't make that connection straight there. It's a good question. We, as developers, come to us and purchase land, and this land was in the county. Had it been one large tract, one owner, we would have had a lot better leverage and a lot better opportunity to make those connections, as you say, or had requested. As the property is taken down, purchased by individuals, it comes to us piecemeal. We really don't have the ability to go in and tell people, wait a minute, we're not going to let you develop your property until somebody else develops their property so we can put this together. If they come in with a viable plan, we look at it on its merits and consider approving it on its merits. Now, if this would have been one big tract,
that obviously makes it easier. I'm just saying that
yes,
the proximity of time that we've been dealing with General's Retreat and this one made me sort of get a little hopeful that maybe we could hit the drawing board and, maybe with both developers, because at this point we know what they want. It is kind of one big tract of land now. Now they've made some plans, but what I was saying is if we could get them the same thing that they want, it might have to be structured like a T instead of an L or whatever to get them what they want. But, look, if you look at Siegel Road all the way south down through Battleground where it connects, it's all 3 lanes. It's a connector. I assume it's the same thing. So, and it's the Battleground piece is straight through a neighborhood too. And people park on the road. And if there wasn't a 3rd lane there, you couldn't get through there every day of the week. So, here's the thing to me. I would at least try to make the phone calls, but...
Well, we actually, to even get the connectivity with General's Landing, we had to go back to the developer and ask him if he'd modify his plan to put that connector in. At the timing, unfortunately, if, sometimes development spurs development, and that's kind of what happened down Thompson Lane, if you will. We had the first one. That one got approved. They've spent a tremendous amount of money with developing site plans, getting infrastructure laid out, approvals, and I'm sure there would be some pushback or reluctance to do that now.
Yeah.
And it just had to do with timing. The only way we can
I'd
actually
vote to pay for it. I'm just telling you that. I'd vote for the city to pay for something like that. If it made sense for the city over a 15, 20, 30, 50-year period so that we would have a good connector straight up through there that could be 3 or 4 lanes, I'd pay them for all the new work. Seriously, I'd even pay them for the ground if we had, for the, to me, we might be able to kill a couple birds with one stone, in my opinion, but I understand where we're at with this thing and why we didn't do it the first time, because we didn't know with certainty what's coming, but
Well, I'm sure Mr. Chris Griffins would be happy to build all the roads that you'll fund.
yeah.
I guarantee you that. So if you'll give us the funding, we'll start. So, but and that's kind of how everything came together, and the attempt to reducing that was to make sure that the people that live in that subdivision, we don't get complaints for it being a major thoroughfare. We don't want it to turn into, as you've heard, St. Andrews type connection.
How strongly do you feel about cutting it down to 2 lanes?
I feel that it will function better as a connector, being narrow. I think if it's a 3-lane cross section, you're going to have trouble with speed. It's a long distance from Thompson Lane to that first turn, and to me, I think it's necessary, and also keep people from. When we looked at this subdivision, and there was a lot of thought that went into it. We looked at the lots to ensure they could adequately park and not be required to park on the street. That was one of the requirements that we had, because we did not want them parking on the street, because that causes problems, delivery of service, trash pickup, all kinds of issues, especially if this is going to be a connector. And again, we do not see this as a high-volume connection.
Speaking of that trash pickup, are they going to make it wide enough for us to have the services where we can get our trucks in?
They should have no problem with turning radiuses and delivery of services on this, because the road will be built. I mean, it's a public road. It will be built to city standard.
And you also said there will be a traffic light going out on Thompson Lane, right?
Not at this location, but at the adjacent development, there is one, because it lines up at Siegel School entrance, so there will be a light there. These people will be able to go through and catch the light to help them get on Thompson Lane.
So it won't be hard. I guess I'm looking at this. I'm not looking at it right. It won't be hard getting out on Thompson with no traffic light there?
They'll have 2 opportunities. They'll be able to come straight out on Thompson, or they can actually go through General's Landing, and they'll be able. That's the reason we wanted that connector, to give them the opportunity to go down to the light that will be provided at General's Landing.
The light will be at Siegel Road and Thompson Lane, not the main entrance to the subdivision.
So on the drawing, the lines, the streets don't line up, but are you saying they're going to line up?
They will line up. That's where you took 2 different engineering firms' plan,
okay,
and meshed it together.
Okay.
We asked the same question.
Okay.
The streets do line up. We just took, when you have 2 different CAD services, put them together, it just doesn't line up on the drawing, you see.
But I see Siegel High School here. It's not a light there now.
General's Landing will be required to add that light. That's part of their development.
It's going to go into the east entrance into the high school, back by the baseball field, right? It's not going on to Siegel Road.
It's actually on Siegel Road, where Siegel Road comes out. There'll be a light there. Is that correct, Sam?
Light right here. General's Landing.
Yeah, Siegel and Thompson.
The light. Yes. General's light. Yep.
And that's the reason it was imperative to get that connector, to give this development an opportunity to go catch that light to get back out on Thompson.
Any other questions for Mr. Whitaker?
Thank you.
I'm going to make one comment, then I'll make a motion. I know that the developer's here, and what I would say is I'm inclined to support it, because I know it's the best with what we've been given at this point, but would just ask that if there was a way we could be open and still get you what you want, that you consider that if a phone call was able to be made. So with that, I'll make a motion for approval. So, including the amendment for 2 lanes.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Scales Harris?
Aye.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Abstain. We'll move to item 9. Pursuant to Resolution 16R PH53 adopted by the City Council on October 13, 2016, we'll need to conduct a public hearing to consider adoption of plan of services for an annexation of 77.1 acres and a zoning of approximately 77.1 acres along Manchester Pike and Mackin Road, which had been proposed to be annexed to the city of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, to Planned Residential Development, PRD District, Mankin Point, 2016-512 and 2016-447. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the November 14, 2016 issue of a local newspaper.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. Our next public hearing deals with the annexation and the plan of services for the property in the orange color that is located at the northeast corner of the intersection of Manchester Pike and Dilton-Mankin Road. It's owned by the Mankin Family Limited Partnership, and the Mankin Family Limited Partnership has petitioned the city for annexation of that property in writing. The tract itself is 70.9 acres, and also included in the annexation study and plan of services, as you can see, is a segment of Dilton-Mankin Road right-of-way in front of the subject property, as well as a segment of Manchester Pike right-of-way in front of the subject property, and also going back up to the northwest and a little bit to the southeast. And that would get the entire intersection of Dilton-Mankin Road and Manchester Pike within the city's jurisdiction. As I mentioned, the property owners have requested that the property be considered for annexation. There's a companion zoning request that'll be the next public hearing on tonight's agenda. We do have the plan of services in the agenda materials before you. It shows that the city can provide services to the subject property upon annexation. One thing that I will mention is that sanitary sewer is not available to serve the subject property. You'll recall that a number of months ago you approved step systems as an alternative measure to when sanitary sewer is not available. And if approved, this would be the first development in the city limits in which the Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Department would operate and maintain the step system for a subdivision. So also the water lines will need to be upgraded with the development in order to provide proper fire flows. But with that being said, as long as those conditions are met, the city will be able to provide services to the subject property upon annexation. As you can see, the annexation of the right-of-way of Manchester Pike to the northwest actually is what's going to connect the subject parcel with the existing city limits. So by annexing that right-of-way of Manchester Pike, the property will be made contiguous with the current city limits. And the property is within the city's urban growth boundary. The next item that after the public hearing will be the resolution to consider the plan of services, and then following that it'll be the resolution to consider the annexation petition itself, and then the zoning will follow that, and I'll get up before the zoning public hearing to give you a brief presentation on the zoning. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Rob Mulchin is here. Of course, he doesn't have a presentation on the annexation, but he'll be here to answer any questions on behalf of the property owner.
Any questions for Mr. Blomley? Okay, thanks, Mr. Blomley. We'll need to conduct a public hearing on the plan of services for an annexation of approximately 77.1 acres located along Manchester Pike and Dilton-Mankin Road. Anyone wishing to speak for the annexation and the plan of services, please come to the podium. The public hearing is open. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll consider for adoption Resolution 16RPS 53 to adopt a plan of services for approximately 77.1 acres along Manchester Pike and Dilton-Mankin Road. The Mankin Family Limited Partnership, applicants 2016-512.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now consider for adoption Resolution 16RA53 to annex approximately 77.1 acres along Manchester Pike and Dilton-Mankin Road and to incorporate the same within the corporate boundaries of the city of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Mankin Family Limited Partnership, applicant 2016-512.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now need to conduct a public hearing and consider zoning approximately 77.1 acres along Manchester Pike and Dilton-Mankin Road, which had been proposed to be annexed to the city of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, to Planned Residential Development, PRD District, Mankin Point, Old South Properties, Inc., applicant 2016-447. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. The zoning for the same property is, as you mentioned, a requested PRD, Planned Residential District, for a development called Mankin Point. Of interest, as I noted before, it would be the first city-owned and operated step system. The total density would be 2.3 single-family detached dwelling units per acre. The minimum lot size would be 7,000 square feet. And it seems difficult to think that you would get only 2.3 dwelling units per acre with lot sizes of 7,000 square feet minimum. But the reason for that is because there is a great deal of open space on the property because of the drip fields that are required for the step system. And Mr. Mulchan will be up in a moment to give you an overview of the development and of the layout. And you'll be able to see that there is a great deal of open space that is going to be required as a part of that step system. One thing I did want to mention, and I won't go over in detail what to be repetitive over what Mr. Mulchan will go over. We did hold a neighborhood meeting on this zoning request, and the big issue at the neighborhood meeting, which was on September 19th at Black Fox Elementary, was traffic. And there were two things specifically that were mentioned. One was the intersection of Dilton Mankin and Manchester, and the difficulty turning left from Dilton Mankin onto Manchester. I did want to bring you up to speed on the latest developments with regard to the signalization of that intersection. The county has been working with the state on signalizing that intersection. With that coming into the city limits, the city will now be a party to that to the signalization of that intersection. So I spoke with Mr. Balachandra just before the meeting this evening to get the latest on that, and he indicated that that project has already been let for bid, and they anticipate starting construction on those intersection improvements in January, and he said that's about a 6 to 7 month project. So the signalization and the associated lane improvements of that intersection should be complete by the summer of 2016, or excuse me, summer of 2017. So that should, as you can imagine, greatly assist in making left turns at that intersection. Also, during the neighborhood meeting, there was concerns because the initial draft of the plan showed one of the internal streets exiting onto Dilton Mankin Road, lining up with Sugar Bush Court. And I'm going to steal a page from Miss Green's playbook and use the telestrator. Also John Madden's, I guess, but there's Sugar Bush Court right there. The original iteration of the plan showed a road lining up right there with Sugar Bush Court. And Mr. Taylor, the design engineer on the project with SCC, heard the concerns of the neighbors. They were concerned about their ability to turn left out of their cul-de-sac onto Dilton Mankin Road. So as you'll see when Mr. Mulchan gives his presentation, they got rid of that intersection, moved the connection point to Dilton Mankin Road back to the east side of the property to address those concerns. So with that being said, I will mention that the Planning Commission did recommend approval of this request unanimously. Mr. Rob Mulchan will come up now and give a PowerPoint presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have either now or after the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Plumley.
Evening again, Mayor and council members. Rob Mulchan with SCC. I'm here tonight accompanied by Mr. Dan Bobo. It's Old South Properties. I just want to give you a quick overview of the project, a little presentation in regards to Mankin Point. Existing conditions, this is, as Matthew talked about, this is located at the northeast corner of Manchester Highway and Dilton Mankin Road. We're bordered on the east by Lee Spring Branch, the little creekway that runs through this area. To the north is a large equestrian-type property, and then to the south is Sugar Bush Court, the single-family detached portion community in the county itself. A little bit of the zoning, as Matthew alluded to, the annexation portion of this will now connect us back to city limits, but as you can see, we're surrounded by pretty much county development on all of our sides. But you can see also the proximity of the portion of the city that's associated with the industrial section that is part of the interchange to Joe B. Jackson, and also its connection back to Manchester Highway, so we're relatively close to a lot of new and more current growth within the city boundary itself as well. Here's an image looking from Dilton Mankin Road back down Sugarbush Court. This is what we were talking about. We were looking originally to have the four-way intersection with Sugarbush Court. Well, this shows you what the character of the neighborhood across the street from the development. This is a picture of Lee Springs Branch actually after it crosses underneath Dilton Mankin Road. And this is the picture of the intersection as Dilton Mankin Road intersects with Manchester Highway. As Matthew talked about, these are the roadway improvements that will be coming forward in the next few months with regards to widening this section of the roadway out to a 3-lane cross section, providing a dedicated left-hand turn lane and a dedicated right-hand turn lane onto Manchester Highway, along with the signalization to make this traffic maneuvers a lot more readily accessible for the residents along Dilton Mankin Road. View of the property itself, as you can see, most of it is pretty much an agricultural property that's been farmed for many years. Plan itself requested in PRD, we're looking at 163 lots on 70 acres. This is down to a 2.3 dwelling units per acre, so a very low density project itself. As Matthew alluded to, it's just because in order to facilitate this being one of the first step projects, every step system requires a lot of open space, and this is shows up in the density requirements for this. The lots themselves are roughly 55 by 130, so they get you a 7,000 square foot minimum lot depth. The homes are roughly 2,000 square foot minimum, up to 3,000 or more on the larger sizes. All the roadways here will be public streets. We've deeded over once the construction is finished. We have a very walkable community as well, with sidewalks on both sides of the streets. This will be, like I said, the first step system the city is undertaking in regards to maintaining the facilities. You can see in the central lower portion of the property, the lighter shaded green, that is the area, 16 acres, that's required for the drip irrigation system for the sanitation water. Again, the project itself has roughly 34 acres, which is more than 50% of this project will be maintained as some kind of open or green space, whether that be the step fields, passive recreational areas, and also detention facilities themselves. And all the utilities with this project will be underground. The homes, roughly 1 to 2 story homes, 2 to 3,000 square feet. Looking at these, are all front entry 2-car garages. The setbacks will be 35 feet to allow for 4-car parking in front of the garages themselves, and the garage doors will be decorative in nature. Building materials, high quality materials, brick, stone, hardy cement board, vinyl siding will only be used in the trim and decorative areas of the homes themselves. And here's a few of the representations. This is more or less some of the product that Old South has been using in Puckett Downs, a community here that's been progressing along very well. As you can see, these are some very good elevations along the streetscape. Amenities. The main amenity feature is going to be along Lee Springs Branch. The creekway itself has a 100-year floodplain on it. We're respecting that entirely. And as part of this, we're looking at putting in a pavilion and play area back here, along with some nature trails. The nature trail itself will extend all the way from Dilton Mankin Road up along Lee Springs Branch back to the amenity area, and we'll have 2 connection points back into Mankin Point, back to the sidewalk system. So not only is the development itself going to be able to utilize the major connectivity of pedestrian sides to get to the creekway, but also residents around the area can also utilize that area as well. And another portion of this is the open space in the front. We've got a area along the intersection of Dilton Mankin and Manchester Highway, more or less as kind of a passive open space, as a kind of a front door appearance to the neighborhood in regards to that intersection, so there won't be any commercial development or anything at the corner. It'll stay passive and green in regards to providing a good character in this area. And this is just an example of the pavilion we're looking at utilizing in that open space along the Lee Springs Branch there. And a little bit tot lot playground area that we're also incorporating. And this is what an idea of what we're talking about from the nature trail standpoint along the creekway. Access, we have two main points. As Matthew talked about, the entrance to Dalton Mankin originally was to line up with Sugarbush Court, which was down here, but as per our neighborhood meeting and respecting the wishes of the neighbors on Sugarbush Court, we took and moved the entrance down off of Dalton Mankin, which will be our second entrance in the future, further down the property to the other side of the step field, which provides a good connection back into the subdivision at the back side of this. And that roadway will extend at some point in time to provide a connectivity point to the north. Our main entrance, of course, off Manchester Highway, will be dedicated right and left-hand turn lanes out of the subdivision onto Manchester Highway. With that, I'm open to any questions now or after the public hearing.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you, Mr. Balshon. Okay, we now need to conduct a public hearing for this zoning request. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium. Public hearing is open. Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll consider for passage on first reading ordinance 16 OZ 53 to zone an area along Manchester Pike and Dalton Mankin Road, which had been proposed to be annexed to the city of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, to plan residential development, PRD District, Mankin Point, Old South Properties, Inc., applicant 2016-447.
What kind of maintenance is on the step system? Could you explain just a little bit about, it says something, explain a little bit about what that means.
In general, Matt Taylor of SEC, the step systems are fairly low maintenance. You have an operator that goes out and checks them once a week. Each home will be equipped with a warning signal in case something's going wrong with the pump or the tank that gets relayed back to the Water and Sewer Department through some telekinetics, just like their normal pump stations. Telemetry, not telekinetics, sorry. And so they're very low maintenance.
It sounded good. Whether
yeah. I thought about just keep going. I was at CUD today, and they have around 3,000 of the homes on the step systems right now, and they say that their maintenance is fairly low. They've only had to replace a yard tank about once in the past 15 years, I think, and then the pumps themselves. They, on average, they'll have about 4 to 5 out of that 3,000 that they have to replace about once a month. And they said that that number has actually gone down because they've changed the design a little bit, which we'll be following on with this criteria as well. The step field itself, it's merely just mowing it. Other than that, there's no real maintenance there. So it's very low maintenance.
And just for those that haven't been along this discussion, why do we consider step systems as opposed to, why can't we get sewer there?
It's so far, the sewer's so far away in this particular location. We'd had to cross and transverse several different properties to get it to this location. And with those obstacles, this was a good alternative. We would have preferred the gravity sewer or the sewer. We would have had a higher density, but that option just wasn't available at this property.
Who services the electricity?
Middle Tennessee Electric.
Each home, those pumps all run on electricity fed from the home meter itself. The pumps and the main system will all get billed back to Water and Sewer Department because it'll become part of their property, and that'll be fed into their bill each month for those residents.
Is this MED or Middle Tennessee Electric?
I believe this particular location is going to be MED still.
It said Middle Tennessee Electric.
Middle Tennessee Electric.
Yeah, that's what I saw. Thought I saw the thing. Okay.
And Mr. Shackman, according to the plan of services, the response we received from the Water and Sewer Department is that they'll be looking at creating a customer class that with fees appropriate towards covering the maintenance and operation costs that'll be associated with with the step system. What those exact fees are, I don't know that they know right now, but that will be determined at a later date.
Okay. Any other questions?
Move for approval.
Second.
Mr. Shacklet, Mr. Wade. Ms. Wright, for call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll consider recommendations of the Murfreesboro City Schools Finance and Administrative Services Director. You're not, and Dr. Gilbert, I don't think you're the...
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I don't know about concrete and all that. We are needing rooms. We are needing rooms at Black Fox, and so what you have before you is a proposal for 10 additional classrooms. We will have 6 that will be on the east side of the building, and then we will have 4 that will be on the west side of the building. Really, just will be extension of 2 wings that are already there, but it will give us enough space for about 200 more children, which we need. We're at $799 right now in that school and have 2 classrooms that, with very few more students, would require us to break those classrooms into 4. But we feel like that this will give us some room to grow on that side of town, and that's what we're needing.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Are you approving the contract with Johnson and Bailey? We have 2 different.
It would be so we'll need to get a motion to approve A. This will be
A
the motion to
first.
approve the Johnson and Bailey Architects.
Okay. Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Dr. Gilbert?
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll
And
move
then
for,
we also need the construction contract,
move
please.
for approval on B.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Dr. Gilbert, I think you can tell with how anxious everyone was on the 2 votes that we don't want to hold you up on getting
Thank you.
classrooms constructed.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And just to let you know that tonight, the Bradley Bobcats were crowned the champions in both the girls and the boys basketball league in Murfreesboro City Schools.
Awesome.
There you go. You're the first to know. Thank you all so much for your support.
Okay, we'll consider for adoption Resolution 16R21 establishing payments in lieu of taxes for the Murfreesboro Electric Department for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2017.
Mayor, this is the annual event where we present to you the resolution establishing the payment in lieu of tax amount for MED. The amount's listed in your resolution, $3,124,546.94. We highly recommend you approve this so we can be sent a check in that amount.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Mr. Sachs, Mr. Wright, thank y'all for sitting through the meeting tonight. So, y'all are free to go or free to stay. Thank you. And I know something to also, that would have said this under other business, but I know with MED being here, they're huge supporters every year. The Christmas tree lighting ceremony is this Friday night at 6 o'clock, and that's something that the marketing staff puts on. So we appreciate y'all's hard work and also appreciate a great year. Consider for adoption.
There's going to be a visitor showing up for that, too.
That's right.
Wears a red suit and a beard.
And he comes in a fire truck, too.
Yeah, he's going to be there, too. So.
All right. We're going to tell Tom not to fall off the
Right.
Consider for adoption Resolution 16R22 regarding TCA 68-211-707 and the approval of new landfills proposed to be located within 1 mile of the city borders.
Mayor,
Mr. Tyndall.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, this is a resolution to adopt opt into the statute that you heard about earlier during the public comment section from Mr. Cannon. He covered it pretty well. I can't add much, but what it allows the city to do is to approve any, it requires application to the city for any landfills within the city limits or within 1 mile of the city limits, and allows the city to to approve those, and it also, if there's any change in the use of the landfill that changes the classification, to have that come before the city council as well. But it requires the municipality to opt in by passing the resolution. By passing this resolution, we'll opt into that statute.
Any discussion?
Sounds like a good thing. I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we have a few beer permits in front of you tonight.
You do. We have a restaurant that's open, ready for approval for a beer permit. If you approve it tonight, they don't have anything else they're waiting on, at 149 Wendellwood Drive. And that application is in order. They have met all of our requirements. There is another restaurant wanting to open at 1141 Fortress Boulevard, Suites F and G. They do like their building codes inspections, but the rest of their application is in order and would be issued upon them completing their inspections if you approve it tonight. And then we have a change of ownership of a grocery market at 1374 West Clark Boulevard. That application has met the background check, but it is also waiting the inspection report from building codes. We would issue that permit upon that being completed if you approve it tonight. We do recommend approval of these, and I'll be happy to try to answer questions.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance. Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Have one board and commission appointment, and this is more a formality of reappointing the city's assistant transportation director to be reappointed for a 3-year term to represent the city of the city on the Rutherford County Wayfinding Program Board, is reflected on the memo from the transportation director, Jim Kerr. Need a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Wright.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Any other business to come from the staff or the city council?
Just to notice that while Friday we're lighting the county Christmas tree, the mayor will be turning the lights on for us. But Saturday night, Oakland's Candlelight Tour is in our downtown. There's lots of venues for you to see and celebrate the season. And so Saturday night is Oakland's Candlelight Tour. Encourage our citizens to go to it.
Go Patriots.
That's right.
That's right, state tournament, yeah.
You know, we had we say we had a bad week. We had a good week too. Is Jacoby Stevens and Jacob Smith. Jacoby Stevens is a defensive back playing for Oakland. I think he's committed to LSU. And then Jacob Smith, who I know Jacob is being recruited by several different schools and has not been signed where we decided where he's going to go, but he is a place kicker from Siegel, and they both won Mr. Football in the state of Tennessee.
Wow.
So,
That's amazing. Great.
The borough is not only still considered Title Town, but we've got two Mr. Footballs living here in town also. So congratulations to not only those schools but the parents of those students. We appreciate their hard work. All right. Seeing no other business, we'll stand adjourned.